They say after 50 the world forgets how you sparkle. That your laughter fades into quieter corners. That your touch no longer sends shivers down a man's spine. But Diane? Diane was never meant for quiet corners. She once made a man stumble over his own words. With just a glance. Made married men wonder why they'd ever settled. Made poets scribble drunk verses at 2 in the morning, wishing they could hold her even once. And tonight, after years of locking her heart away, she was stepping back into the light. Not for love. Not for promises. For herself. The night was thick with the smell of whiskey and jazz. The kind of night where anything could happen. If you dared. Her black dress clung to curves that spoke of a woman who had lived, who had lost, but had never been defeated. Her smile, oh that smile, was the kind of soft danger that could undo a man before he even knew he was falling. She didn't hunt. She didn't chase. She simply existed. And still they came to her. Eyes lingering. Breaths catching. Hearts fumbling in the dark. There was one man that night, older but not broken. Sharp eyes. Rough hands. A man who looked like he could handle a woman who wasn't built for easy loving. And for one suspended moment, the air between them pulsed. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust. It was something far older. Far more dangerous. The kind of connection that asked nothing, but promised everything. But what Diane didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that this night would not end in soft kisses or whispered names. No, this night would change everything. Forever. The moment their eyes met, it was as if the room dimmed around them. The clinking glasses, the low hum of conversation, the crooning jazz singer in the corner. All of it faded. It was just Diane and him, orbiting the same invisible star, pulled closer by a gravity neither dared acknowledge. He didn't smile. Not right away. Instead he watched her, as if trying to memorize the way the light caught the edges of her hair. The way her lips curved, not into a grin but into something quieter. Something meant for secrets. Diane took a slow sip of her wine, the rim of the glass brushing against lips that once knew how to drive a man crazy without saying a word. She tilted her head, an invitation wrapped inside a mystery. And he answered, not with words but with movement. 2 steps forward. Not rushing. Not cocky. Just certain. A man who had known enough women to recognize that real elegance doesn't scream for attention. It murmurs. Beckons. He stood close enough for her to smell him, leather, musk, and the faintest trace of something darker, something dangerous. You don't belong here, he said, voice roughened by too many late nights and too much bourbon. Diane smiled, slow, deliberate. Neither do you, she murmured. It wasn't a flirt. It was a dare. And God, the way he looked at her after that. It was the look of a man who knew exactly how trouble tasted, and still wanted to sink his teeth in. She felt it then, that old, dangerous pulse waking up inside her. The one she thought had died with her husband. The one that whispered wicked things in the dark. What if? What if she didn't have to be polite tonight? What if she didn't have to tuck her desires into neat little boxes labeled too much and too late? What if she just let herself want? He leaned closer, enough for her to feel the heat of his breath against her ear. Care for a real drink? He asked. Her heart beat once, hard and low. Not because of fear. Because of memory. Because somewhere deep inside her body remembered what it was like to be wanted like this. Not for what she could give. Not for what she could do. But for who she was. Alive. Unapologetic. Dangerous. She rose to her feet, slow and fluid, smoothing the hem of her dress as if she had all the time in the world. Their eyes locked again, a silent agreement passing between them. No promises. No lies. Just tonight. Just now. They walked toward the back of the bar, past the old piano and the cracked leather booths, into a quieter corner, where the shadows softened the hard lines of age and time. He ordered something dark and smoky. She stayed with her wine, the ruby liquid catching the low light like blood in water. For a while they talked. But not about jobs or children or the endless ache of middle age. They talked about music. About cities they wanted to see before they died. About stupid things like the worst dates they'd ever suffered through. Diane laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. The sound surprised even her, loud, rich, full of a woman who hadn't been buried yet. And when he reached across the table, brushing his fingertips against the inside of her wrist. She didn't pull away. The touch was feather-light, almost accidental, but it wasn't. It was deliberate, measured. A man who knew that the slowest touches burned the longest. Diane shivered, heat spreading from that tiny point of contact outward, blooming under her skin. Their conversation stumbled after that, words tripping over each other, silences growing longer, need filling the spaces they didn't know how to name. When he stood up and offered his hand, she didn't hesitate. She let him lead her outside into the cool night air. The city buzzed around them, alive and indifferent. Cars honking, music spilling from open windows, life rushing on without pause. But for Diane, time folded in on itself. Here she was, 52 years old, hair pinned up but already coming loose, dress hugging hips that had borne life and weathered loss, stepping into the unknown with a man she barely knew. And she didn't feel foolish, or reckless, or desperate. She felt powerful, alive, dangerous. He pressed her gently against the brick wall of the alley, one hand braced beside her head, not trapping her, giving her the choice. Always the choice. His forehead rested lightly against hers, breath mingling in the narrow space between them. "You sure?" he asked, voice rough, barely a whisper. Diane closed her eyes, breathed in the moment. She thought about every time she'd said no when she wanted to say yes. Every time she'd swallowed her desires for the sake of being proper. Every night she'd gone to bed cold and alone, pretending it didn't matter. She opened her eyes and smiled. Soft. "Sure. Yes," she said. And just like that, the dam broke. His mouth found hers, not with teenage urgency, but with a hunger that had been simmering for a lifetime. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, anchoring her to him as if he feared she might disappear. There was nothing polite about it, nothing careful. It was messy, real. And for the first time in years, Diane let herself be kissed like a woman who mattered, like a woman who could still set the world on fire. And somewhere between the stolen kisses and the shaky breaths, she realized something that made her heart race for a whole different reason. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about waking up, about remembering, and maybe, just maybe, about starting something she could no longer control. The alleyway blurred around them, melting into nothing but sensation. His hands were rough against her skin, tracing lines no one had dared to touch in too long. Her fingers tangled in the fabric of his jacket, clutching at him as if she could anchor herself against the tide surging inside her. Diane knew she should stop, that this wasn't how she had planned it, that elegance didn't live in dark corners and breathless kisses. But damn it, tonight wasn't about plans. It was about feeling again, about tearing through the quiet, lonely years with teeth and nails and the reckless hunger of a woman who had buried too much. She kissed him harder, biting his lower lip just enough to make him groan deep in his chest. And he responded, God, he responded like a man starved. Their bodies pressed close, heat rising between them despite the cool night air. Everywhere he touched her, she burned. Everywhere she pressed against him, he trembled. It would have been so easy to let it happen right there. To fall back against the rough brick, to let the night swallow them whole. But somewhere inside Diane, something fierce and sharp woke up. Not yet. Not like this. She pushed against his chest, gently but firmly. He stilled, breathing hard. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, memorizing the rasp of stubble under her touch. "I'm not a secret," she whispered, voice raw. He closed his eyes for a moment, forehead resting against hers. "No," he said. "You're not." When he opened them again, there was something different in his gaze. Respect. Desire still smoldered there, dark and urgent. But layered under it was something better. Something that made Diane's heart ache in ways she hadn't expected. He stepped back, giving her space, his hands raised in surrender. And for the first time in a long time, Diane realized, real power wasn't in being desired. It was in commanding how you were desired. Without apology. Without compromise. She smoothed her dress, heart still racing, skin still buzzing with the aftershocks of him. "Walk me to my car," she said, tilting her head, a small secret smile playing at her lips. He offered his arm, old-fashioned, and she took it without hesitation. They strolled down the sidewalk, their bodies brushing occasionally, every touch sparking like static. He asked her name. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, the old instinct to guard herself kicking in, and then gave it. "Diane," she said, letting the name roll off her tongue like a promise. He smiled, slow and devastating. "Matthew. Just names. Just enough." At her car, he opened the door for her. A gentleman in a world that had forgotten how to raise them. She paused before slipping inside, looking up at him through her lashes. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me," she whispered. And God help her, she meant it. Because for all the heat and the hunger, what shook Diane the most wasn't the way he had kissed her. It was the way he had looked at her, really looked like she wasn't invisible. Like she wasn't past her prime. Like she wasn't broken. Like she was breathtaking. She slid into the driver's seat, hands trembling just a little. Matthew leaned down, resting one forearm on the top of the car. "I hope this isn't good night," he said, voice low, thick with possibility. She tilted her head, considering. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe it was the simple, reckless thrill of being wanted again. But Diane didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached up and traced his collarbone with one fingertip, slow, teasing. "Maybe," she said, smile wicked. "Maybe not." And then, before he could lean in again, she pulled the door shut with a soft, decisive click. Left him standing there, stunned and grinning as she started the engine and pulled away. Diane's heart pounded all the way home. Not with regret. Not with fear. With life. She parked in her driveway, cut the engine, and sat there for a moment in the quiet. Her lips still tingled. Her body still ached in delicious, dangerous ways. And she knew, deep in her bones, that she had crossed a line tonight. Not a line into disgrace. A line into freedom. But as she fumbled for her keys, phone buzzing somewhere in her purse, she caught a flicker of movement in her rearview mirror. A shadow. A shape. Too fast to see clearly. Her breath caught. The night, so full of promise a moment ago, suddenly thickened with something darker. Colder. Someone was watching. And Diane, heart hammering, realized something chilling. Maybe she wasn't the only one who had been paying attention tonight. The shadow flickered across her rearview mirror again, slower this time. Diane froze, one hand still clutching the keys, the other tightening on the steering wheel. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. Maybe it was nothing. A stray cat. A trick of the streetlight. Maybe. But deep in her gut, the place where instincts lived, raw and ancient, she knew better. She locked the doors with a soft click, the sound far too loud in the silence of the night. For a moment she sat there, fingers trembling against the cool leather of the steering wheel, willing herself to calm down. The driveway stretched before her, familiar and safe. The porch light burned warmly, a beacon against the dark. She just had to get inside. She grabbed her purse, slung it over one shoulder and stepped out, heels clicking against the concrete. The night air wrapped around her like a second skin, cool, damp, thick with something that tasted like electricity. She didn't look around. She didn't run. Running invited predators. She walked steady, purposeful, up the path toward her door. The keys jingled in her hand, louder than they should have been, betraying the tremor she couldn't quite hide. And then a voice behind her. Low, rough, familiar. "You forgot something." She spun around so fast the world tilted for a second. Matthew stood there, one hand extended, dangling from his fingers. Her phone. Diane's heart slammed against her ribs. He looked different now. Not dangerous. Not threatening. Just too still. Too calm. As if he had been standing there for longer than he should have. Watching. Waiting. Her mouth was dry when she spoke. "I must have dropped it." She reached for the phone, fingers brushing against his. The touch sparked through her like static. He didn't let go immediately. Instead, he held it there between them, eyes locked onto hers, something unreadable flickering in their depths. "You shouldn't walk alone at night," he said, voice softer now. Almost tender. Almost. She forced a laugh, light and brittle. "I can handle myself." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're tough," he said. "I like that." She tucked the phone into her purse, heart hammering so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Thanks," she said, stepping back toward the door. "Good night, Matthew." For a second he didn't move. Didn't speak. The air between them crackled. thick with something that wasn't quite desire anymore. And then finally he nodded, hands sliding into his pockets. "Good night, Diane," he said. She turned, shoved the key into the lock, twisted. The door swung open. She stepped inside, slammed it shut, and threw the deadbolt with a satisfying thunk. Only then did she sag against the door, chest heaving. Safe. For now. But as she moved through the house, turning on lights, checking windows, double-checking the back door, she couldn't shake the feeling clinging to her skin. The feeling that she had been seen tonight in a way she hadn't intended. Not as a woman reborn. Not as a temptation. But as a target. She poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands, the coldness of the liquid grounding her, anchoring her to the now. Her phone buzzed against the counter, making her jump. A text. Unknown number. "You're even more beautiful up close." Diane's stomach twisted into knots. She didn't know if it was from Matthew. She didn't know if she wanted it to be. She stared at the screen, heart racing. Another message popped up before she could respond. "Can't wait to see you again." She set the phone down carefully as if it might explode. And for the first time tonight, she wondered if flirting after 50 wasn't just about learning how to attract again. Maybe it was about learning how to protect yourself all over again, too. She climbed the stairs to her bedroom, bolting the door behind her even though it felt foolish. She wasn't some fragile girl. She was a woman who had survived worse. Widowhood. Loneliness. Loss. She could survive this too. She peeled off the dress, the black fabric sliding down her body like a lover's touch, leaving goosebumps in its wake. She caught sight of herself in the mirror. Hair tousled, lips swollen from kisses, eyes wide and wild. And for the briefest moment, despite the fear coiling in her belly, Diane smiled. She was alive. She was dangerous. She was seen. She slipped into a silk robe, tying it loosely around her waist, and climbed into bed. The city buzzed beyond her windows. Life went on. And somewhere out there someone was thinking about her. Wanting her. Maybe even hunting her. Diane pulled the covers up to her chest, heart still racing, and stared at the ceiling. She didn't know where this story was going. But for the first time in years she was certain of one thing. She was ready to find out. Even if it meant risking everything. Because love, desire, danger, they didn't come with expiration dates. And neither did she. The house groaned under the weight of midnight. Somewhere a pipe ticked softly in the walls. The fridge hummed its lonely song. The city outside faded into a distant blur of sirens and restless engines. But Diane couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, the silk robe tangled around her legs, skin prickling with leftover adrenaline. Every time she closed her eyes she saw Matthew's face, the hunger in it, the danger. She wanted to believe it had just been excitement, chemistry. But deep down she knew better. There was a line between desire and obsession. And tonight she had seen a man flirting with that line. Maybe even crossing it. The phone buzzed again on her nightstand. She flinched, the sound carving through the darkness like a blade. Another message. Same unknown number. Still thinking about you. Diane sat up, heart thudding. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Block the number. Delete the message. Easy. Safe. But something in her, something reckless and curious and still aching for connection, hesitated. She typed back, hands shaking slightly. Who is this? 3 dots appeared immediately, blinking like a heartbeat. She waited, breath caught somewhere between hope and fear. You know who. The words crawled across the screen like fingertips against bare skin. Soft, insistent, invasive. Diane threw the phone onto the bed and stood up, pacing. Her bare feet whispered against the wooden floorboards. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window. A woman caught between hunger and terror. She told herself it was nothing. A fluke. A misunderstanding. Men got bold sometimes. Flirting turned messy. Lines blurred. It didn't mean she was in danger, did it? She moved to the window, peeking through the blinds into the night. Nothing. Just the quiet street, the lonely pools of lamplight. But still, the hair on the back of her neck stood on end. She stepped away, pulling the robe tighter around herself. Maybe she needed to call someone. A friend. The police. Tell them what? That a man had kissed her too hard and texted her too late? They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd pity her. Poor lonely widow, getting carried away by her own fantasies. No, she would handle this herself. She always had. Diane turned back toward the bed and froze. The front door creaked. Not loud, not obvious, just enough. She strained to listen, blood pounding in her ears. For a moment, silence. And then, a soft, deliberate knock. 3 beats. Measured. Confident. Diane's pulse spiked. Every instinct screamed at her to stay put, to lock herself in, to wait until morning. But another voice whispered, darker, older. The voice that remembered what it was like to be desired, to be hunted, to be alive. She padded quietly down the stairs, each step deliberate, careful. The house smelled different now, like night and rain and something else. Something sharp and metallic. At the door she hesitated, pressed her palm against the solid wood, felt the vibration of waiting on the other side. And then, without letting herself think, she opened it. Matthew stood there. But not the man from the bar. Not quite. This Matthew was disheveled, wild-eyed, beautiful in a brutal, broken way. Rain slicked his hair to his forehead. His jacket was soaked, clinging to muscles that strained under the fabric. He looked like he had run through a storm just to get to her. Maybe he had. Neither of them spoke for a long, taut moment. The night gaped open behind him, vast and endless. And Diane, God help her, felt something primal stir inside her. Fear, desire, recognition. He stepped forward into the threshold without asking, close enough that the wet heat of him soaked into her skin. I couldn't stop thinking about you, he said, voice low and hoarse. She swallowed, her throat tight. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. His hand rose, hovering just above her cheek. Not touching. Not yet. I had to see you, he said. I had to know if it was real. The air between them vibrated, thick with unsaid things. Diane's heart twisted painfully. Was this what she had wanted? To be seen? To be wanted so fiercely it bordered on destruction? His fingers brushed her cheek, feather-light. And in that touch she felt it, the truth. It wasn't love. It wasn't even lust. It was hunger. Raw. Consuming. A man drowning in himself, reaching for her like a life raft he had no intention of letting go. She should have pushed him away. Should have slammed the door. Should have screamed. But instead she stood there, trembling, breathless, and let herself be wanted. For a heartbeat longer. For a breath more. Until he leaned in, mouth finding hers in a kiss that wasn't sweet or tender. It was a claim. A brand. And Diane, for all her strength, for all her wisdom, realized something too late. There are worse things than being invisible. Being wanted, by the wrong person, might just be one of them. The kiss tasted of rain and desperation. Diane's hands fisted in the fabric of his soaked jacket, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer. For a moment, just a moment, she let herself drown. Let herself feel the raw power of being wanted without question, without hesitation. But then, reality snapped back like a whip. This wasn't passion. This wasn't tenderness. This was hunger. Pure and simple. A hunger that didn't see her, only wanted to consume her. She broke the kiss first. A sharp, deliberate movement. Matthew staggered back half a step, confusion flashing across his rain-slick face. Diane, he began, voice ragged. She held up a hand, not trembling, not pleading, commanding. Stop, she said, voice low, cutting through the night like a blade. His mouth opened and closed, a man unused to being refused. Diane straightened, pulling the silk robe tighter around her body, reclaiming herself inch by inch. You need to go, she said. Matthew's expression shifted, a flicker of anger quickly masked by charm. Come on, Diane, he said, smiling that devastating smile. You feel it too. Don't lie. She did feel it. The chemistry, the temptation. But she also felt something colder now. Something primal and dangerous lurking just beneath the surface of his skin. No, she said, voice steady. I felt it. And now, I feel something else. He stepped forward again, hands half raised as if to soothe, to seduce. You're scared, he said softly. It's okay. I get it. Diane didn't flinch. She met his gaze head-on, unblinking. I'm not scared, she said. And it was the truth. Not anymore. Not of him. She was scared of herself. of how close she had come to forgetting everything she had fought so hard to reclaim. Her dignity, her power, her damn self-worth. Matthew's smile faltered just a hair. He wasn't used to women walking away. Not after he'd tasted them, marked them. But Diane wasn't 20 anymore. She wasn't desperate for validation. She had survived too much to be undone by a pretty face and a hard body. "I think you should leave," she said, voice still soft, still deadly calm. Matthew's hands curled into fists at his sides. For a heartbeat, Diane thought he might argue, might push. And she was ready. She had a can of mace in the drawer by the door. She knew how to scream. But instead he laughed, low and bitter. "You'll regret this," he said. She smiled, sweet and poisonous. "Maybe," she said. "But not tonight." For a long, tense moment, they stared at each other across the threshold. Predator and prey. Except this time he wasn't sure which was which. Finally, Matthew turned on his heel and disappeared into the rain, his silhouette swallowed by the night. Diane closed the door, locked it, bolted it, chained it, and then she leaned her forehead against the cool wood, letting out a long, shuddering breath. Not because she was scared, because she had one. Not the kiss, not the man, the moment, the choice. She made herself a cup of tea with trembling hands, the mundane ritual grounding her in the aftermath of chaos. The phone buzzed again. She ignored it. For now. She curled up on the couch, robe tucked around her, tea steaming in her hands. Outside, the rain hammered the world clean. Inside, she sat in the soft, golden glow of her living room, whole and unbroken. And for the first time in years, Diane smiled without sadness. She wasn't just flirting after 50. She was living after 50. Choosing. Commanding. Thriving. The night wrapped around her like a velvet secret. And somewhere, deep in the belly of the city, danger still stirred. Still watched. Still waited. But so did she. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. A knock echoed against the door again. Sharp. Urgent. Not Matthew. Someone else. Something else. Diane set down her tea, straightened her spine, smoothed her hair, and walked toward the door. Whatever waited for her on the other side, she was ready. Ready to flirt. Ready to fight. Ready to live. And this time, she would choose who was worthy of touching the fire she carried inside. No matter the cost. The knock echoed again, sharp, deliberate. Diane's bare feet whispered against the floor as she crossed the room, each step steady, unhurried. Gone was the fear, the hesitation. She reached the door, heart calm, mind sharp. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Because tonight wasn't about who stood on the other side. It was about her. Her choice. Her voice. Her life. She opened the door slowly, savoring the creak of the hinges, the cool rush of night air brushing against her skin. A man stood there, not Matthew. Someone new. Younger. Softer around the edges. Eyes wide, almost reverent. He held out a bouquet of wildflowers, messy, vibrant, alive. "Hi," he said, a little breathless. "You don't know me. But I noticed you at the bar. I wanted to say, you're extraordinary." Diane stared at him for a long moment. And then, she laughed. Not cruelly. Not dismissively. A real laugh. Full. Warm. Free. She took the flowers, fingers brushing his. "Thank you," she said. Not a promise. Not an invitation. Just gratitude. Just grace. He stood there, shifting awkwardly, waiting for something more. But Diane had already turned, flowers cradled against her chest, stepping back inside her house, back into her kingdom. She closed the door with a soft click. Not a slam. Not a goodbye. A choice. The night stretched out before her, endless, shimmering with possibilities. Not just for flirtation. Not just for desire. For life. For laughter. 4 late-night adventures and early morning regrets and second chances she hadn't even dared to dream of. She placed the flowers in a vase, the colors spilling open like a secret. And as she sat down, curling into the warmth of her couch, Diane knew something with absolute certainty. She hadn't lost her magic. She had only forgotten where she had hidden it. And now it was hers again. Not for anyone else's approval. Not for anyone else's gaze. Hers. Always hers. The phone buzzed once more on the coffee table. This time she didn't flinch. She smiled. The game was just beginning. But now she was playing by her own rules. Maybe you're standing at your own threshold right now, too. Maybe you're wondering if it's too late to flirt, to dream, to live boldly again. Let me tell you something straight from Diane's story to your heart. It's never too late. Not at 50. Not at 60. Not ever. If Diane's journey sparked something inside you tonight, if it made you smile or ache or remember what it feels like to want more, then you're exactly where you need to be. And this is just the beginning. What about you? Have you ever felt that thrilling, terrifying pull to step back into life after years of hiding away? I'd love to hear your story. Share it with us in the comments below. Let's build a space where age doesn't dim the fire. It fuels it. And tell me, would you want more videos about flirting with elegance, dating after 50, rebuilding confidence, or even secrets to subtle magnetic attraction at any age? Your voice shapes this space, and I can't wait to create with you. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because next time we'll dive even deeper into the art of living boldly, loving fully, and owning your power. One beautiful, unapologetic step at a time. Until then, stay radiant, stay unstoppable, and remember, you are not forgotten. You are unforgettable. Good night, beautiful souls.